Will Cal Petersen be the LA Kings' #1 goalie? We'll talk about that and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. On today's episode of Locked On LA Kings, we continue our look at the Kings goaltending position with a focus on Cal Petersen. My name is Eddie Garcia. I am your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for almost 30 years. For the past 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, where I'm a co-host, sidekick, reporter, and NHL analyst. I also co-host the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that has been putting out content for the past 17 years, and of course, a lifelong LA Kings fan. Today, we continue our look at the Kings goaltending position. On Monday, I talked about Jonathan Quick and his future with the Kings. More on that in a second. Today, I'll be taking a look at Kings goalie Cal Petersen. You might be surprised to learn that Cal will turn 28 years old this October. He was originally a fifth-round pick with the Buffalo Sabres in 2013. He ended up not signing with Buffalo, attended the University of Notre Dame, where he played hockey, and then ended up signing with the LA Kings as a free agent in 2017. Now, in 2 of his 3 seasons in the AHL with the Ontario Reign, not that impressive, posted an overall record in those 3 seasons with the Reign of 53, 51, and 7. That was in 116 games in the AHL. Had a goals against average of 3.34, save percentage of .904. It's been more of the same at the NHL level for Cal Petersen. He has posted a record at the NHL level of 39, 39, and 8. That's in 91 games with the Kings over parts of 4 seasons. He's got a 2.86 goals against average and a .907 save percentage. Now, despite some pretty average numbers as a pro, the Kings signed Cal Petersen to a 3-year, $15 million extension that starts this season. Now, last year, he did share the net with Jonathan Quick. Quick made 46 starts. Petersen made 35. His record last year with the Kings was 20, 14, and 2, 2.89 goals against average, and a .895 save percentage. So the Kings clearly believe that Cal Petersen has the ability to be a #1 goaltender by giving him the extension. But I'm not quite sure I see what they're seeing or maybe what they're hoping. Now, it can't be what he's accomplished so far. It has to be for what they feel he can be, for what their talent evaluators project him to be, but it's a little bit of a dodgy situation to invest that kind of money on potential, especially with a potential of a 28-year-old goalie. We're not talking about a 19, 20, 21-year-old that you're projecting on. This is a guy who I think he kind of is what he is at this point. At least make him show for 1 season at the NHL level that he's capable of being a #1 goalie before you decide to give him $5 million a year. Stats may not tell the entire story of a player, but if you go by the stats, Cal Petersen, so far as a pro in the AHL and the NHL, has been okay. Certainly nothing spectacular. Now, I could cite specific stats that would make you think Cal Petersen is worthy of this investment. There's also stats out there I could cite that make you think that this is probably not a good investment for the Kings, but that is how stats can be. They can prove and disprove a lot of things. But if you look at his stats, like I said, they're okay, not spectacular, not horrific, but okay. And I think the eye test tells a similar story. If you watch Cal Petersen play last season, there were times where he did look very good. There were times where he looked like, wow, if this is the guy we see consistently, that's a #1 goalie, potentially. There were also times he didn't look very good. There were also times he had bad. Now, every goalie has a good and bad, but I think, again, when you look at Cal Petersen, there's not a lot of consistency there. He has okay games, he has good games, he has bad games. If you're going to invest in a guy and you think he's the #1 goalie for the immediate future, I think you need to see a little bit more than what Cal Petersen has shown at this point. I guess you could make the argument that he has never been just given the net for an entire season at the NHL level to prove or disprove what he can be. But again, you also earn your time in net. And I think it's pretty clear that the coaching staff doesn't feel that Cal Petersen has earned the right to be the Kings' number one goalie, or he would have been it this past season. Now, if you think about the money he's making and you think, well, $5 million per season, it doesn't seem like that much. For a backup goalie or for a guy who isn't established as a number one goalie, it is a pretty significant amount of money. Just as a comparison, guys who are in the league that also make $5 million per season are UC Saros in Nashville, Thatcher Demko in Vancouver, Robin Leonard in Vegas, and Jack Campbell in Edmonton. Cal Petersen's making only $1 million less than Jacob Markstrom of the Calgary Flames, who has, I think, clearly established himself as one of the top goalies in the Western Conference and probably the top goalie in the Pacific Division. He makes just $1 million more than Cal Petersen. All those guys have proven to some degree or another that they can be number one goalies at the NHL level. Cal Petersen has not. He has not proven that so far. Now, it's hard to believe that Cal Petersen is just suddenly going to figure it out at 28 years of age and turn into something that he hasn't shown at the pro level at this point, in my opinion. The Kings are betting that he can or will. Last season, it seemed like a pretty poorly kept secret that the Kings were thinking that Cal Petersen would end up winning the number one goaltending job. That did not happen. So what is the thinking of the team going into this season? I honestly don't know. I don't know that it's been specifically addressed. I think that's something that head coach Todd McClellan will get asked, I would think, going into training camp. What's the plan on how you're going to use the goaltenders? I would assume, based on how Jonathan Quick played last season, that we would see at least a similar 1A, 1B option, with Jonathan Quick being the 1A option and being the starting goalie, but basically sharing time in net with Cal Petersen as well. So what's the benefit of that? What's the upside of having two goalies, essentially? Well, it could be argued that both guys, knowing that it's pretty much a competition for the number one job, maybe that pushes them both to be kind of on the edge and competing at the highest level at all times, knowing that that number one job is still kind of to be earned. That could be. Also, it could be, if there's an injury to one or the other and they're both basically sharing time in net, then that's a pretty easy transition for the team and for the goaltender, if he's been playing more than just your typical backup, to assume that role, right? If Jonathan Quick goes down, to injury, it's not going to be a dramatic change to have Cal Petersen take over. I'm sure the team feels pretty confident in him because of the number of games he has played both last season and potentially this coming season. So there's not a big change there. So that could be a benefit as well. But we'll see how it goes. It's still to be determined. But like I said, financially, the Kings have invested quite a bit in the goaltending position. And I was very surprised to learn this fact, that Jonathan Quick and Cal Petersen have a combined salary cap hit of $10.8 million, and that makes them the highest paid goalie tandem in the NHL. I had done the research to see where does that salary kind of fit as far as the Pacific Division. And then I found out, well, they're the highest paid goalie tandem in the Pacific Division. Well, I wonder where that ranks in the Western Conference. Then I find out, well, they're the highest paid goalie tandem in the Western Conference. So then I had to go forward and see, well, where do they rank in the entire NHL? And again, the answer is Jonathan Quick and Cal Petersen, their contracts together, $10.8 million for this coming season. That's the most that any team in the NHL is paying for both their goaltending positions. Of course, every team has two goaltenders on their roster. So that was a surprise. And I think if you asked a lot of people, do you think Cal Petersen and Jonathan Quick should be the highest paid tandem of goalies in the NHL? They would be like, no, I don't think that they have earned that. It's a little bit unusual. It does go to show you what the Kings thought about the goaltending situation, that they're still trying to figure it out, that they have two guys that they think are good, but not one guy that is great. Now, if you look at most of the goaltending situations around the NHL, usually teams have, and I think prefer to have, an established, clear number one goalie and then a clear number two guy. In other words, you're going to pay $5, $6, maybe $7 million a year to that number one guy, and the number two guy is going to make $1 million or less, right? So you're only investing around $7, $8 million in the goaltending position. The Kings are almost investing $11 million in the goaltending position. It's not the ideal position because you'd like to have that extra $5 million or so to spend in other places to improve your team. Like example for the Kings, re-signing Mikey Anderson and Sean Durzi with maybe without going over the salary cap. But is this the ideal situation for the LA Kings? No, it isn't. But it is the situation they find themselves in for at least this season. Jonathan Quick's contract is up after this year. There's a lot to be determined going forward. Can Cal Petersen prove this season by wrestling that number one job away from Jonathan Quick that he is a number one goaltender at the NHL level, and he can be the answer in net for the short-term future of the LA Kings? That remains to be seen. After this year, if Jonathan Quick plays well, are they going to have to continue going forward with this tandem and paying that amount of money to this tandem? We know they have to pay Cal Petersen for the next 3 years unless they were to trade him, which I don't know what type of market would be out there for him at that salary. Not much at all, I would think. So put it all together. Again, it is a very interesting, maybe stressful dynamic going forward for the LA Kings to see how this plays out. Like I said, on the upside, if somebody gets hurt, you feel pretty good that you can turn to the other guy and be okay. That's the one good thing about having a pair of goalies that you do pretty much believe in. But again, it's not. I think it's not the ideal situation that the Kings would like to have themselves in. But again, it is the situation. It is the reality for this season, and it is going to be very, very interesting going forward to see who establishes themselves in net and what does that mean for the short-term future of the goaltending position with the LA Kings. Cal Petersen certainly, I think it can be said, has a lot still to prove for this season and for the immediate future for the Los Angeles Kings. Okay, so I put a poll question out yesterday on our Locked On LA Kings Twitter account, which is at Locked On LA Kings. And I asked, what will happen with Jonathan Quick after this season? And I put a few options out there. And if you've ever seen one of those polls on Twitter, it's limited in the number of characters you can use and things. So it has to be kind of dumbed down, I guess, a little bit. But I put 3 options out there for what the future holds for Jonathan Quick after this season. Option number 1 was that he plays well and gets re-signed for next year. Option number 2 was that he plays okay and then ends up going elsewhere after his contract expires. And then option 3 was that he loses the number 1 job and is going to retire after this season. 61% of you feel like option A is the most likely scenario, that he plays well and that he is re-signed. Only 14% of you thinks that he plays okay and ends up going somewhere else. And we had 25% of you thinking that he loses the number 1 job, Cal Petersen takes over, and that Jonathan Quick would retire at the end of the year. We did have some comments as well on Twitter about this subject, which is absolutely encouraged as well. And just checking a few of the comments, we did have Carter Rubin said that he thinks that Quick plays well and then retires. West Coast Bias said he plays well and retires. He's too competitive to be happy being a backup. KG Martin 32 says that he plays great, is the number 1 goalie all season, and then agrees to a 2-year reduced salary to give the Kings some cap space. And then the statue is built and unveiled in 2025. Turcotte Search and Rescue says plays well, then retires. A message for you, Rudy, and that's spelled with the HR for former Kings goalie Kelly Rudy, says wins the Jennings with Petersen, which is the best combined goaltending numbers in the NHL, retires, and then enters the 2024 presidential election. Well, that would be interesting. He is an American citizen, so he could do that. LA Kings Pride has, I think, what all Kings fans would love to see. Wins the Cup and the Conn Smythe, and then resigns for another year. Crystal said, I think he plays well, extends 1 year, and then retires. I think it is interesting that several of you that commented thinks that he will play well and then retire. And look, that's the dream, right, for any professional athlete. They want to go out on their own terms, and they want to go out on a high note. Right? They want to go out on top as a winner. That is so rare in professional sports. It almost never happens. happens. And I understand why. I think players want to squeeze as much out of they can as out of their careers as they can get, not only just financially, but from just the standpoint of feeling like I left it all out there and I didn't have anything left to give when it was all said and done, and so I'm going to walk away. I think that was very much what Dustin Brown felt after this past season when he decided to retire. He didn't have a great year. Felt like, I've played out my term. I've had a lot of success. I've won 2 Stanley Cups. I've had a great career, and it's the right time. So it'll remain to be seen whether Jonathan Quick has that kind of ending as well. But I would be surprised if some of those comments come to play. Because if he has a good year, why would he retire on a good team? Hopefully, right? That is a potential Stanley Cup contender going forward. So if he has a good year, I think he resigns. But hopefully that is the case. Hopefully we have that dilemma at the end of the year that, oh no, Jonathan Quick has played well, and we need to try and re-sign him for the next year or two. So anyway, thank you to all who participated on the Twitter poll. Going to put up another poll today regarding Cal Petersen. If you're interested in that, check that out. It'll be up for 24 hours, and we'll read the results on tomorrow's show. And also thanks for all the comments as well, and all the follows and everything else as far as it goes with social media and the Locked On LA Kings Twitter account. Hey, if you'd like to place a wager on the LA Kings to win the Stanley Cup next season, betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, a big trade deadline going on today, combat sports, esports, and even golf. Head to BetOnline or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. So as far as Kings news over the past 24 hours, still nothing to report on the re-signing of the remaining restricted free agents, defensemen Mikey Anderson and Sean Durzi. Of course, once that happens, we'll have all the details for you and discuss it on the show. And just for some context, if you're worried about, well, why is this taking so long? Why haven't they signed these guys yet? It is not uncommon or unprecedented around the league to see players that are unsigned at this point, restricted free agents. I think probably the biggest example is with the Dallas Stars, where their #1 goalie, Jake Ottinger, is a restricted free agent and still hasn't signed. And their #1 young player, who is a Southern California native, Jason Robertson, born in Arcadia, was a junior king at one point. Again, really talented young forward. He also is a restricted free agent that hasn't been signed by the Dallas Stars. So there are definitely other teams out there still looking to sign important players. So it's not anything to be panicked about that, oh, why haven't the Kings signed these guys yet? What's going on? So that is the remaining, I guess, bit of offseason news still to be determined involving the LA Kings. We do have some news, though, on some LA Kings prospects, and including former first-round pick defenseman Brandt Clarke, first-round pick of the Kings in 2021. He, along with fellow Kings draft pick, a second-round pick in that same year, forward Francesco Pinelli, both not selected for Team Canada to represent the team at the World Junior Championships coming up starting 1 week from today. I saw Brandt Clarke play on the final day of the Kings development camp in the scrimmage that they had. So I don't want to come off like I'm any kind of expert on him, but there are a lot of people out there who know and follow and have covered him and his development. And those people who do know say this guy is pretty much a sure thing to be an NHL player sooner rather than later. Maybe there's a slight chance he could even make the LA Kings lineup this season. And it's very difficult to understand and to believe that there are 8 other defensemen in his age group in Canada that are more deserving of a spot on Team Canada for the World Juniors than he is. So, but this has been with this current management of Team Canada. It was very well publicized that Brandt Clarke was not originally selected for the World Junior roster when the tournament was originally to take place back in December of 2021. And then, of course, the tournament started briefly and then was called off because of COVID and rescheduled for this August. So this time around, they did include Brandt Clarke on the roster, but he ends up not making the final cut. The man that is running Team Canada, their general manager, is Alan Millar. Their head coach is the Arizona Coyotes head coach, Andre Tourigny. He's the coach of Team Canada for this year. And apparently, without seeing an explanation at this point, those gentlemen felt that Brandt Clarke wasn't a fit on Team Canada, which is a bit of a head scratcher just based on everything that everybody says about Brandt Clarke. I can only assume because Brandt Clarke is more of an offensive defenseman, maybe they feel they have enough offense on that roster with the forward positions. They don't need offense from the blue line. They want their defensive core to be more defensive oriented. I mean, I'm trying to figure out an explanation. Still hard to believe you wouldn't want a player like this on your roster. But like I said, apparently they believe he's not a fit with their current makeup because it can't be just a talent situation. Again, everything we've heard and read is that this guy is an NHL caliber defenseman soon. And like I said, difficult to believe there are 8 other more deserving defensemen at his age group in Canada that are being selected, but that's the case. That is the case. It has got to be very disappointing for Brandt Clarke. He's kind of gone through this, I guess, before because he was left off the roster initially. But what is the upside to this for Brandt Clarke? Always try to look at the silver lining in situations, being the optimist that I am. And I guess I'd have to say, well, we know he's not going to get hurt at the World Juniors. That's always a good thing. It's always a dicey thing when you have players participating in events that don't involve their teams. And maybe this is just more motivation for Brandt Clarke going forward, that he still feels like he's got something to prove to some people in the hockey world. So I guess that would be the benefit of it. I was able to find the final rosters for Team Finland for the World Juniors. It will feature a pair of Kings prospects, forwards Kaspar Simontavo. He was a third-round pick in 2020, and forward Samuel Helenius, a second-round pick in 2021. So they have made the Team Finland roster for the World Juniors. Otto Salin, a fifth-round pick this past year, defenseman, did not make it for Team Finland. Also, Helge Grans, a defenseman for the Kings, second-round pick in 2020, is on the World Junior roster for Team Sweden. So it looks like I'll be following Team Sweden and Team Finland a lot at the World Juniors. So of the 8 LA Kings prospects that were originally selected to compete for roster spots, only 3 end up making it on a World Junior roster. If you want to watch the World Juniors, you can see all the games on the NHL Network, streaming live on Fubo TV and Sling TV as well. A week from today, Finland's first game is a week from today at 6 p.m. Eastern against Latvia. Sweden's first game is next Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, also against Latvia. But you don't have to watch if you're not that interested. But if you are interested in how these players do, I will watch for you and report back on how these Kings prospects will do at the upcoming World Junior Championships. Just a reminder that the Locked On NHL podcast has you covered for all your league-wide NHL talk with a rotating cast of local hosts from the Locked On NHL channel, breaking down the biggest stories in hockey 5 days a week. Subscribe for free on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. So coming up on Wednesday's show, we will obviously update you on any LA Kings news that happens over the past 24 hours. We'll continue to look at the Kings goaltending as well beyond Jonathan Quick and Cal Petersen. What in the organization do the Kings have that could potentially be the future of the LA Kings net going forward? We will talk about that on tomorrow's show. Hey, to keep up to date on this show and what's going on with the LA Kings, please follow us on Twitter at LockedOnLAKings. And if you would like, go vote in that Cal Petersen poll that I'm going to put up. If you'd like to send me an email with any comments about the show or anything involving the LA Kings, you can do so at LockedOnEddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, LockedOnEddie@gmail.com. We do have a Friday weekly email segment where we read the emails that are sent to us. I want to thank you, as always, for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast of all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date in the hockey world with Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. Hey, thank you so much for listening and for watching on YouTube to Locked On LA Kings. I'm Eddie Garcia, reminding you as always, go Kings go.